Hello, in this video I'm going to show you how I like to tie a yellow and black Snealda style fly. In this case I'll be using a 10mm micro crayfish tube. So I'll put the tube in the vise and lock it tight. There you go, that's going nowhere. And I'll be using size 80 black tying thread. So tie it on, a few turns, cut off the surplus, and keep on winding back towards the big groove at the back. And here I'm going to put a few layers on just to help when we're tying on the next part, which is the feelers, which are made of feather stalks I've stripped and just left a tiny bit on at the very back. And it'll be tied at about 3 to 3.5 times the length of the tube. Tying the first one, turn the vise upside down, or the chuck upside down, and tie the next one in. And then turn it a quarter over, because we're quartering the fly with these. And just a few turns in each one to hold it in place. I'll put the last one in. There we go. Now this done, we just want to cut some of the surplus stalk off, not all of it, but most of it. Okay, now what we want to do is just use a tying thread to pull the rest of the stalks in towards the base of the fly. There we go. And one, that'll make sure it all holds in place, and two, it acts to help create the shape of the fly that we're trying to create towards the end. The next thing we need to do is add on some of the tail, which is black and yellow bucktail, and we're going to quarter the fly in it. So the first quarter we're going to use black. What I tend to do is quarter it between the stalks I've put in. So that's the first quarter. Just a couple of turns to hold it in place, that's all we need at this stage. Turn the tube over and do the same again. Now, like any fly, you want to make sure you don't have too much material in the tails, but you have to just judge it as you go along. So just lock that bit in. Now we turn it over again. Just making sure that's spread nicely. Use your fingernails just to twist it slightly if you need. Next we want to put in the yellow. And again, a small bunch at the top. A couple of turns to hold it in place. Make sure it's spread nicely. Turn it over to do the last bit. which was spread to cover the whole area. And a few more turns now, just to hold it in place. Next, obviously, what we want to do is cut off all this surplus. So just take small bunches at a time and cut it off. Now you won't be cutting it tight to the tying thread because you'll not be able to get that tight in, but it doesn't actually matter. So just get in as tight as you can. And just tidy it up. There you go. Right, next I want to add a little bit of twinkle, so I'll be using micro flash in pearl over the black. So put one strand in, one turn, pick it up, back over itself and lock it into place, and cut off any surplus. Turn over and do it again in the next quarter. Again, one turn, back over itself and lock it into place. Cut off the surplus. And over the yellow, what I like to use is a single strand in each side of lateral scalar in pearl. Put it over, just like before. One turn, back on itself, lock it off. Cut off the surplus, which we'll use again for the next one. Okay, spin the fly over. Introduce it to the fly. One turn to lock it in. And two to lock it right over. And cut off the surplus. This time we just want to tidy up a little bit. So now we tied up all this extra stuff here at the top. Just some turns of this tying thread. There we go. Looking good. Next I like to put a hackle at the back of the fly here. So using a black feather, introduce it to the back. A few turns to hold it in place. Cut off the surplus. And here I'm going to do 3 turns. So grabbing the hackle plier, pinch your fly back, pinch the feather back to help it start, and grab the bottom of the feather and make a turn. There you go. Just teasing the feather back all the time. Just one turn. Teasing it back. Two turns and one last turn. Teasing it back. Tie it off at the top. Few turns to hold it in place. And cut off the surplus. Cut out any stray bits of feather in the wrong place. Pinch it back and a couple of turns just to keep it where it's supposed to be. There we go. Right, that done. The next thing is to introduce the rib that I'll be using. In this case, it's just a silver rib. So tie it in at the back of the fly there. A few turns to hold it in place. There we go. Right, now I'll create the body. In this case, I'll be using black seal fur as dubbing. And so just introduce it to the tying thread. A couple of turns. A little more. Just twist it around the thread. There we go, that's enough. So just get rid of any surplus. Tie it off. There we go. Right, now take the rib, one turn around the back, and then open turn around the body you've created and lock it off. 2 or 3 turns to hold it in place. Back on itself. Now at this point I like to lock it off, so I'll put a half hitch in, keep everything in place. There we go. And cut off the surplus. Now again, here what I like to do is I like just to tidy up a little bit, so just cut off some of the stray hairs. It'll make no difference to the fly at all, because everything's locked in place. There you go, that's the body finished. There we go. Right, next we want to do the front hackle. And again, this will be a yellow and black hackle, using a slightly larger feather than before. So we'll start with the yellow. Introduce the yellow feather to the body. Lock it in place. A few turns just to make sure it's tight. And cut off the surplus. Now, I think here we'll be using 2 turns, so again, hold the feather in the hackle pliers, pinch the feather back. This will just help start the turning process, and grab the bottom of the feather and make sure it's pointing in the right direction. There we go. Teasing it back. That's the first turn, just tease it all back. Teasing it back to keep it the way you want it to be. And now at the top, one turn to lock it in place. Now a couple of turns, cut off the surplus feather, pull it out. Now push the feather back with your fingers to grasp all the feather, and then do a couple of turns, and that makes sure the feather's all sitting back the way you want it to point. Good. Now we want to do a couple of turns of black over the top, and the feather should be roughly the same size as the feather you used before. So there we go. introduce it to the top. The reason you always introduce it to the top is you're trying to create a symmetrical fly. And if it's symmetrical, it should swim straight rather than spin. Because you've got all weight on one side rather than the other, it will start spinning. If the weight's distributed evenly, it should sit straight in the water. So pinch this feather back, just like before. Right, grab the bottom of the feather, create the first turn. Make sure it's all going the right way. That's the first turn. Always teasing it back. When you get to the top, the second turn, we'll lock it into place. There you go. Another turn or two. Cut off the surplus. And again, push a feather back with your fingers, grabbing all the stray ends, and do a couple of turns. There you go. And again here, I think it'd be wise just to lock the fly off. A single turn. There we go. And just pinch out any feathers that have got a stray. There we go. Now you have two choices here. You can either put the cone head on straight away, or what I like to do is I like to add in a couple of jungle cork cheeks. So I'll add one in there. Two turns to hold it. Spin it over, because we want the other one to be right opposite. Just have a quick look to make sure they're the same distance. There you go. That's pretty good. So what you can do here now is you can pull back the stalk and lock it into place. Pull back the other stalk, lock it into place, which will just secure that jungle cork into the fly. Now I'll put one more hitch here. There we go. And now it's time to just cut that off. There we go. So what I do now is, rather than using varnish to secure the tying thread, in this case we're going to use a little bit of super glue. Just add the super glue there. Just a couple of places around the tube, that's all we need. One last bit here. There we go. Right, now lastly we want to put on the cone. Now I vary this cone. I like to put tungsten cones off if I think the river's going to be running quite fast, or just normal cones if not. So add the cone, push it over the end of the fly as tight as you can get it. Right, now if you think you've got too much tube there to burl off, just slice a little bit off. There we go. Okay, now all you need to do now is light it up, wee bit of heat to it and it'll start barreling back. There we go, that's that. What I like to do is just after I've done that, I like to put a needle into the end just to make sure the hole's widened. And there you go, a yellow and black Snealda variant. I'll just take it out of the tube. There we go. And there you go, a yellow and black Snealda variant.